You're listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here, another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in and glad to have you along for the ride. Jam-packed show for you today. LSU football, they open spring practice on Saturday. Yes, they are back. So one thing we're going to do, we're going to start previewing each position today. We'll start with quarterback. Go figure, it's the most important position on the field, and it's one where LSU should feel really, really good, as good as they felt in a very, very long time. We have a bit of an update in the search for a new defensive line coach for LSU that we will pass along. And, of course, the baseball Tigers swept through the week, swept through the Frisco Classic, winning that tournament with a 3-0 record. In doing so with a couple of gritty, character-defining wins along the way. So some thoughts for you overall on that weekend as well as they open turn the page or start a new chapter here this week, another 5-game week for Jay Johnson and his Tigers. So be sure to like, share, subscribe, all of those things. Follow me on social media as well. Twitter X at Musso Matthew. Facebook, you can find me there as well, and on Instagram at Matthew Musso 1. So let's go ahead now and let's get right into it. Stumbled there over the start. We'll begin with LSU football. We'll begin with a quick, brief update on the defensive line coaching search. So look, as we know, Bo Davis late last week leaves LSU for the defensive line coaching job with the New Orleans Saints on Kellen Moore's staff. That opens up a spot for Brian Kelly. Of course, the move happened just 10 days before spring practice set to get underway, so you're in a bit of a bind there timing-wise. Again, it would make sense in the interim that Kevin Peoples just oversees the entirety of the defensive line while LSU goes and searches for the next position coach on the interior. And, well, one of the guys they had targeted was Gerald Chapman over at Florida. That name should sound very, very familiar to you. Of course, he spent time at LSU, 2 different stints. But Bruce Feldman over the weekend reports that Gerald Chapman will remain in Gainesville. So you can cross him off the list. Now you turn your attention further down the line a little bit. I know Henderson at USC has been mentioned, guy with plenty of Louisiana ties. He's a New Orleans native, one of the most respected defensive line coaches in the country. We'll see. That's obviously going to take a lot to pry him away, but then again, you are paying Bo Davis $1.25 million to be your defensive line coach. So LSU's proven that they'll pay for that position, and whatever you do, the next guy, you're in search of the same things. You're in search of the development. The recruiting will come. I kind of feel like regardless. But having a guy with Louisiana ties, not going to be a bad idea there at all. And the development, but what you want most of all is stability. So this is about to be your 8th defensive line coach you're hiring. I mean, the last 4 have been here 1 year. We kind of know that story there. So that's really the latest where that stands. We'll keep you updated as any more comes across. In turning towards spring football, we're going to start with quarterback because, again, most important position on the field. And while you think you know what you have there, it is a really interesting room for LSU that has actually become more and more interesting over the course of the offseason. So just looking at it, Garrett Nussmeier, your starter, right? The incumbent, we know. And again, looking back at Garrett Nussmeier's 2024, he had a phenomenal year. Did it result in everything you wanted it to win-loss-wise? No. And was Garrett a part of that? Yeah. But overall, in its totality, in the 13 games that LSU played, Garrett Nussmeier was really, really freaking good. Garrett Nussmeier completed 64% of his passes. Garrett threw for over 4,000 yards, 4,052, which is the second highest single-season total in LSU history, behind only Joe Burrow. You had that stretch right there in the middle of the season, really starting with that second half against Texas A&M and rolling through the Alabama game where the interceptions were a problem. He threw 5 in a game and a half. Outside of that, Garrett protected the football really well throughout the course of the season. You saw him make numerous big-time throws. I mean, everyone's going to point to the Ole Miss throw to Aaron Anderson that ultimately sent the game to overtime. I mean, that was NFL level. He had a few of those against South Carolina as well. I mean, he had plenty of NFL throws throughout the year. You feel really, really good about Garrett Nussmeier as your starting quarterback, and you expect him now to take the next step. Does the interception total need to come down? Absolutely. 12 is too many, and they'll work on that. And I would expect that number to come down for a lot of different reasons around the offense. You hope with some of the additions that you've made to staff that you can be better suited to perform in the running game, which would obviously help Garrett Nussmeier. You've obviously gotten him more weapons on the outside, but the decision-making solely lies on him. That is the one thing you're looking for from him, though. You saw the deep ball accuracy, which everybody really wanted to harp on a season ago, improve dramatically once Chris Hilton came back. Go figure, he actually gets a legitimate deep threat, and he can complete the deep ball. I mean, crazy how that works, right? So you'll have Hilton back. Again, you add Brown, Anderson, all those guys. You should expect a big jump, and that's what LSU is, to where Garrett Nussmeier can potentially play himself into, dare I say, quarterback one for the draft in 2026. And in the process of doing that, lead LSU to the college football playoff, and you'll see where it goes beyond that. And that is the expectation on Garrett Nussmeier and this LSU offense as they head into spring practice. But it's behind him where things get really, really interesting for this room, because you bring in Michael Van Buren out of the transfer portal from Mississippi State, where he ended up, because of injury to Blake Shapen, being the starting quarterback for the Bulldogs in his freshman year. He started the last 8 games of the season. 10 overall, 8 starts. Passed for almost 2,000 yards, had 11 touchdowns, 5 rushing touchdowns. There was a lot to like about Michael Van Buren. The thing that's you like most is you bring in a guy with starting experience. When you look at your top 2 in the quarterback room, this is as good as LSU has felt in a long, long time. And I know we've kind of said that. And I mean, again, a lot of people go back to 2023 where you have returning starter in Jaden Daniels and you have Garrett Nussmeier behind him. And that's great. But again, Nuss had 1 start. You could go back to 2019, right, where you have Joe Burrow in his second year, Miles Brennan behind him. But again, Miles Brennan did not have the starting experience that a guy like Michael Van Buren has. If something happens to Garrett Nussmeier, God forbid, you have a guy with 8 starts under his belt in the SEC, in Michael Van Buren. There aren't a lot of teams in the country that are going to have that type of depth and quality and experience depth at quarterback. So, I mean, you feel great, I think, about your first 2. And it's necessary because you saw a year ago in the Oklahoma game when Garrett Nussmeier gets hurt, what life without him could be like, minus a veteran, experienced, talented backup quarterback. No disrespect to A.J. Swan. The guy's played a lot of football, and when his number was called, he went in there. But the drop-off was very, very noticeable. A guy like Van Buren has a higher ceiling, much more upside than, say, a guy like A.J. Swan. And the other thing that does is, we think, it provides the stability for your room. All the conversations we had when he committed. Then you dive into what's even behind him. And obviously, the car accident with Colin Hurley is not something that any of us wish on anybody. Very traumatic experience, and at last update, he's still back home in Jacksonville, continuing to recover on that. LSU obviously not expecting to have him for the spring, and you'll just wait and see the time and recovery and everything necessary to be back fully healthy to where he can contribute for this LSU football team. LSU moves Juwan Johnson to quarterback. Of course, we're all very familiar with Juwan Johnson. Broke records, rewrote the record books in Louisiana high school football in his time at LCA. Most total yardage, I should say, in Louisiana high school football history with 14,451 yards. Broke the total touchdown record in the state as well with 171. LSU started him out at cornerback. Then, of course, you had the injury to John Emery. the situation with Trey Holly, so you move him to running back. He gets some run there as a freshman. Now he has moved to quarterback. And when we saw this news, or when they released the spring roster, and we all saw this, sat here on this show, talked about, okay, they need a guy to be back there and throw the ball. Like, they need a guy for camp because of the situation with Colin Hurley. But the more Brian Kelly speaks, the more it seems like, yeah, there's something more there for Juwan Johnson. With an athlete like that, why not? And there's talk of a package specifically in the red zone. Brian Kelly mentioning that to Wilson Alexander over at The Advocate in a one-on-one exclusive interview that the two did. And also that they went to Juwan Johnson and said, hey, look, I don't know if running back's going to work out. Obviously, cornerback, where do you want to play? And he said, I'd like to give quarterback a try. So here you go. And Brian Kelly, when talking about the potential for a red zone package for Juwan Johnson, mentioned that, a lot of that comes from Garrett Nussmeier being hesitant to run the football a year ago. And we had plenty of conversation about that, where it's like you didn't need Garrett Nussmeier to go out there and be Jaden Daniels. You really just needed him to be Matt Flynn, Joe Burrow, right? Just go get me the 3-4 yards that we really need. Can you quarterback sneak it on the goal line? Things of that nature. But the hesitancy was obviously there from Nuss, but also from LSU to really kind of put him in those spots, it felt like, at times. So when you look at a guy like Johnson, I'm absolutely for that. I mean, LSU's had plenty of success with that model here in this golden era of LSU football. I mean, obviously, everyone's going to think that the two most prominent examples that everybody will think of are Ryan Perrilloux and Matt Flynn in 2007. You rode that all the way to a national championship. Perrilloux even getting some starts when Flynn was, out with the ankle. But the other one would be Jarrett Lee and Justin Jefferson in 2011. And yes, we all know and remember how that ended. But if you remember how it started with Jordan Jefferson coming in goal line sets and short yardage and things of that nature. The first snap he took that season was a quarterback sneak on the goal line against Kentucky into the end zone for a touchdown. So you've had success there. And LSU needs that again, because when you go back and you look at the red zone stats, sure, overall in the year they were 83% in the red zone. But when you look at just touchdowns, 56% of the time LSU scored a touchdown in the red zone. That was 94th in the country a season ago. So anything you can bring to the table that makes that better, that improves you there, I'm all for it. And if that's Juwan Johnson, bring it on. And then, of course, you have your walk-ons at that position, highlighted by Emil Picarella, high-level walk-on out of U High. So you look at the quarterback room, man, you got to feel really, really good about where LSU stands as they head into spring practice here ahead of the 2025 season, with Nuss and Van Buren as veterans, both with starting experience in the SEC, and then a wild card potentially in Juwan Johnson, who can provide scoring opportunities and scoring threat for you down in the red zone and in short yardage packages. Most important position on the field feels pretty stable for LSU here ahead of spring 2025. All right, let's switch gears to some thoughts on LSU baseball. Again, the Tigers, a 5-0 week, beating Nichols on Monday, ranked win against Dallas Baptist on Wednesday in Arlington, and then winning the Frisco Classic, a 3-game sweep over Kansas State, Nebraska, and Sam Houston State over the weekend. We'll focus in mainly there on the Frisco Classic. So LSU defeats Kansas State 8-5 in 10 innings. It was a game where they lost the lead twice but never trailed. And ultimately, Josh Pearson would kickstart a fantastic week for him with an RBI single in the 10th to give LSU the lead. They would add 2 more runs on a single by Danny Dickinson, part of a 6 RBI day for him on Friday against Kansas State. On Saturday, LSU would fall behind Nebraska 5-0 early before storming back behind 3 straight zeros after the rough start by Anthony Ianson and some fantastic 2-out offense in 3 different innings. LSU going on to an 11-6 win over Nebraska in game number 2, and then LSU would race out to an 11-3 lead against Sam Houston State on Sunday and lead by 7 a couple different times before ending up kind of having to hold on for dear life a little bit down the stretch, winning that one 12-8. Walks an issue there for LSU on Sunday, and a little bit kind of over the course of the whole weekend. We'll give you some overview thoughts here, just as a whole in the weekend. Obviously went more in depth on Musso at the box into each game. But first and foremost, what stands out is the grit, determination, and the character that LSU showed this weekend to win 3 out of those 4 games. It took a lot against Dallas Baptist. I mean, that was a ranked matchup against a really good team. LSU never trailed in that game. They had opportunity to put DBU away and couldn't, but ultimately ended up scoring plenty in the ball game, and you had great pitching down the stretch. Case and Evans was fantastic at the end of that game, and you win. You go to Friday in the same deal, where LSU, they battle against Jacob Frost, and they break through for 2. Cade Anderson gives you 5 1/3 really good innings, but then gives up the back-to-back homers, ties the game, and is out. But LSU immediately responds, goes back up by 3, and you have 9 outs to get, and you're feeling good, and that's when the command issues really took center stage for LSU for the first time. You had some problems with walks, hit batters in that 7th inning, and ultimately Kansas State puts up 3 of their own and ties the ball game. But LSU, behind some elite defense in the bottom of the 9th inning, through a perfect relay throw and play between Pearson, Milam, and Hernandez to nail the winning run at the plate. Follow that up with a web gem by Danny Dickinson that also saved a run and sent the game to extra innings. And then, of course, we mentioned Josh Pearson and Dickinson in the 10th, and Case and Evans would close the door for LSU once again. That was a lot of grit. That was a lot of character. And it just showed again on Saturday. You fall behind 5-0, but you keep responding. And Anthony Ianson really settled in. Had trouble landing his curveball early in that game, and that allowed for some pretty good pitches to hit with 2 strikes, and Nebraska didn't miss them. You credit those guys. But when it was time to settle back in, he did it, and he's done that throughout the season. Anthony Ianson is definitely a guy who gets better as the game goes along. He started landing the curveball more, and he throws up 3 zeros, and the LSU offense responds. And no bigger than in the 7th inning when they put up 6 to take the lead for good. 4 of the 6 runs, all scored with 2 outs. They were awesome, and Josh Pearson that day followed up his heroics in extra innings on Friday, followed that up with a 4-hit day on Saturday, including 3 doubles. And then again, LSU looked like they were just going to run away and hide. Run rule was going to be in play against Sam Houston, but command was a problem for the Tigers on Sunday. They walked 10 guys. Overall on the weekend, LSU issued 19 walks and hit 3 batters. That is 22 free passes. That is entirely too many, and that needs to be corrected immediately, and I think that it will be. LSU, it'd be very easy in the past to come out of a weekend like that on the mound and panic. But this team has shown incredible command so far this season, where that is really the outlier. And even in the game Saturday, LSU only walked 2. So you still saw the flash of it this weekend. But y'all, the grit, the determination, the character, the will to win stood out more than anything. Because every team that goes on a deep run in their sport, every team that wins a championship in their sport, at some point wins a game that maybe they shouldn't have, or it looked like they weren't going to. And these were those games for LSU, at least some of them. You finally were faced with adversity again, and you responded to it exceptionally well. And that's ultimately what you wanted to see after that loss to Omaha. That was the first adversity you faced all season, and you didn't pull it out. You faced it again a week later, and you won both of them. And we learned plenty. And that's ultimately how you want to do it, is you want to learn the lessons and wins. You got your wake-up call already. And I think that showed through immensely this weekend for LSU. So a hat tip just in the character and will to win department from the Fighting Tigers. We kind of talked about the pitching there. 22 free passes is too much. But when you look at your starting rotation, it wasn't the banner weekend for those guys, but they all battled, and they all battled hard. And everyone except Anderson got the win. And he got a no decision. So it was their first taste of adversity and a step up in competition, and they passed. They passed the test. Now you'll go forward into your full week before conference play begins, and it's another 5-game week. There's plenty to work on from a pitching staff standpoint, and I think what you would like to see is domination from your starting rotation here the final week leading into conference play. Offensively for LSU, they were awesome. And we'll get into some left-on-base talk here in a minute. But they were incredible all weekend. LSU scored 31 runs. They banged out 17 hits alone on Saturday, 40 hits total, 40-plus hits total on the weekend. And they hit 434 with 2 outs over the course of 3 games in Frisco. 434 with 2 outs. It felt like just about every single run was scoring with 2 outs for LSU. And, y'all, that's a big deal. And that has been something that we've seen early this season for LSU. And the more it happens, the more it becomes the norm and a trend. And if you can score with 2 outs, you're going to win a lot of baseball games. 2-out RBI and low walk totals. That wins baseball games. I'll say it one more time. 434 with 2 outs this weekend in Frisco for LSU. Josh Pearson, of course, was the highlight. He was tournament MVP, hit 667 over the course of the 3 games. The 3 doubles. He scored 7 runs. He was awesome. When you were looking to get things going against Ty Horn on Saturday, Josh Pearson was the guy who always got it going. He started 3 for 3 in that game, and ultimately, was right at the center when LSU broke through. You saw Danny Dickinson have another really good weekend. He hit 384 and had the 6 RBI. He's been fantastic behind Jared Jones. To watch him come through twice on Friday after Kansas State intentionally walked Jones, that's what you're looking for behind him. I think he's got that spot locked up right now. Stephen Milam continues to stay hot. Jake Brown had another good weekend. Obviously, Jared Jones. Derek Couriel at the top of your lineup, that is solved. You have found a way to keep Stanfield and Couriel hitting next to each other by having Couriel lead off, where he's fantastic. You can't keep the kid off base. He's got an on-base percentage close to or over 600 currently on the season. He hits to all fields, gives you great at-bats. You've solved that. And he's had a great first 3 weeks and had another great weekend again. And then you look at the left-on-base thing that everyone wants to talk about. And y'all, we'll just have the same conversation that we've had over and over and over again throughout Jay Johnson's tenure at LSU, and that he's had to have plenty throughout his career. Jay Johnson's teams are going to leave a lot of guys on base. And I'm not saying that that's okay. I'm just saying there are certain instances where it doesn't matter. And there are times where it does. This weekend was one of the times where it doesn't. And here's what I mean. Yes, LSU scored 31 runs on 41 hits, or however many hits it was. The offense should not be your concern. But a lot of you are still frustrated that LSU leaves the bases loaded. It really is as simple as the more guys you get on, the more guys you're going to leave. The key, though, is LSU is scoring the majority of them. Why? Because they're staying within their plan and their approach and what they want to do on offense. And that's the key. When I say they're going to leave a lot of guys on base and it doesn't make it okay, that's what I mean. When you look at that 10-inning stretch against Omaha where LSU didn't score and they left 13 on base, that was a problem. And why was that a problem? Well, the 0, obviously, in the run column. But why did that happen? Well, LSU, as a lineup, as a team, got away from their plan, got outside of themselves, tried to do too much. They pressed. They weren't executing what was being asked of them offensively. You can be doing that and still fail to get the run home. You're not going to get every run home. It's baseball. The other team is still going to get 27 outs, and eventually you're going to leave guys on base. But LSU's also going to put a lot of guys on base, which is going to lead to them scoring a lot of runs and leaving the guy on base, especially if they continue to do this with 2 outs. That's the other thing. If you're scoring a bunch with 2 outs, eventually you're going to leave somebody on base because someone's going to get the 3rd out of the inning. LSU, even when they failed to get runs home this weekend. They still looked in control of what they were trying to accomplish at the plate. And that's encouraging. And that's why I would tell you, just deal with it. They're going to leave a lot of guys on base, and it's not the negative that you think. The 2023 team left a lot of guys on base. The 2022 team left a lot of guys on base. They were also two of the most prolific offenses in the program's history. Last year, when LSU was leaving a load of guys on base, they were outside of their plan. It took you a while to get the lineup where you wanted. And once you did, you saw them really kind of take the next step. You've already kind of got the lineup where you want. You can see who the main contributors on this team are going to be. Now it's just them locking in their 9. All right, that's going to wrap it up, y'all. Be sure to subscribe, share, follow on social media, all those great things. And be here next time for more on LSU Daily.